Hello everybody and welcome back to Be Like Christ. We're talking about Matthew chapter 17 in 5 minutes. We've got free handouts, which you're about to see, for all the chapters in Matthew and Luke, and we're working on some more. If you want those, there's a link down in the description. If you want to support the free resources that we give away and they've been valuable to you and you want to give back, there's a link to our Patreon account down there as well, so check those out. Now, Matthew chapter 17, when do the events of this chapter take place? Well, this is probably between 26 and 31 AD. If you look at the dating carefully, this is during Jesus' earthly ministry. And almost all of what happens in the Gospel of Matthew fits within that time frame. We've got several important characters in this chapter. There's Jesus, he's the Messiah, he's the main character. He's carrying the story for us. There's Moses. He's an Old Testament prophet who God delivered the Mosaic law to, or the old law of the Jews. There's Elijah. He was a prophet that God used during the days of the divided kingdom. We have Jesus' disciples, his students. There's a demon-possessed boy, and this boy had seizures, and he fell into the fire and into the water, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. There's tax collectors. They asked Peter if Jesus was a tax-paying citizen, and then we have, well, Peter, or Simon. He goes out and he catches a fish, and there's some money in the fish's mouth, but more on that later. Where do the events of this chapter take place? Well, there's a famous event in this chapter called the Transfiguration. This happened on a mountain, but that mountain is not named. Some people think that it is Mount Hermon, some people think that it's Mount Tabor, but nobody knows for sure. Jesus heals this demon-possessed boy when he comes down from the mountain of Transfiguration. We know that the conversation in verses 22 and 23 occurred in Galilee, and the tax collectors approached Jesus about the temple tax in the city of Capernaum. So all of those are on the map there. Now for our outline of the chapter, the first section is a big one, a popular Bible story, the Transfiguration. This is verses 1 through 9. Jesus took 3 of his apostles, Peter, James, and John, up onto a mountain, and he was transfigured or changed before them. And he had a conversation with 2 guys who were long dead, but appeared on the mountain, Moses and Elijah. Now, Peter had the bright idea of building 3 tabernacles, or 3 tents for Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. But there was a voice from heaven that answered his idea, and that voice said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." And then after this whole event, this transfiguration, Jesus told these 3 apostles to keep this a secret until after his resurrection from the dead. Section 2, a question about the prophet Elijah, verse 10 through 13. So having just seen Elijah conversing with Jesus, the apostles asked Jesus why the scribes taught that Elijah had to come before the Messiah came, and they were wondering how that all fit together. And Jesus told them that Elijah had already come. John the Baptist had come preaching and teaching with the spirit of the prophet Elijah. When Jesus gets down the mountain, leads us into our third section of the healing of this demon-possessed boy, verse 14 through 21. So a father of a demon-possessed boy was down at the bottom of this mountain. He wanted his son to be healed, or this demon to be cast out. He had already talked to some of Jesus' other disciples, and he wanted them to work the miracle, but they were unsuccessful. After expressing his frustration with the faithlessness of the people around him, Jesus proceeded to cast the demon out of the boy, and he was instantly made better. Jesus' disciples then came up to him and asked him why they weren't able to cast out the demon, and Jesus told them that it was because of their, quote, little faith. Just as Jesus had in the last chapter, he now again prophesies of his future death in verses 22 and 23. Jesus foretold that he would be delivered into the hands of men, killed, and would rise again from the dead on the 3rd day. The text says that the disciples were, quote, greatly distressed when they heard this prophecy. The idea of the Messiah, the Christ, dying, it wasn't in their mind, and it wasn't in the Jewish traditions. And then finally, in the last section, the miraculous tax money. Don't we all wish we could get our taxes paid this way? This is verse 24 through 27. So there's some tax collectors from Capernaum. They came up to Peter and they asked him if Jesus paid his taxes, specifically the temple tax. After those guys left, Jesus talked to Peter and he told Peter to go fishing. And when he went fishing, he would catch a fish and he would find a coin, a shekel, in the mouth of the fish that he caught. So that's what Peter did, and that's what he got. Now, the big picture of this chapter, one really important key here that helps us to understand all of the Bible is what God said to Peter on the Mount of Transfiguration. When God spoke from heaven, he said that this Jesus was his beloved Son. Listen to him. He made it clear that Jesus was to be the source of authority moving forward for the followers of God. Moses and the prophets, they had played their part and they had done their job well. But God was now saying that Jesus was his final word to mankind. And Moses and Elijah, they would have affirmed this. All that they had done was leading up to Christ. And now for an application. In this chapter, Jesus' followers, they were unable to cast out a demon because of their little faith. Modern day Christians, myself included, we have moments of little faith when we're not what we should be. We don't always represent our master well. And so I would encourage you, don't evaluate Jesus and his power based on his imperfect followers. Evaluate it on the power and the words and the character of Jesus himself.